Megan Carter stood outside her house with her two children, Lily and Jacob. They had only a few bags with them. The sun was setting, and the house that used to be their home was no longer theirs. Just days before, Megan's husband, Greg, gave her divorce papers. He didn't yell or fight, he just said it was over. After 15 years of marriage, he ended everything without a second thought. Greg had been having an affair with a much younger woman, and he didn't even try to hide it. Their friends had known for a while but stayed quiet. Megan always hoped Greg would come back to her, but she was wrong. Greg told her, "I think it's time you moved out. The house is mine. Take whatever you can fit in your car." His cold words left her feeling empty. She lost everything, her home, her financial security, and her sense of worth. All she had left were her children and the sad truth that she had nowhere to go. Lily, who was 16, crossed her arms and asked, "Where are we even going?" She was upset and distant, just like her father. 10-year-old Jacob stayed quiet, hugging his old teddy bear and looking at his mom with confused eyes. "Mom, when can we come back?" he asked. Megan knelt down, trying to stay strong. "I don't know, baby, but we'll figure it out," she said, forcing a smile even though she felt broken inside. With the car packed, they drove away from the house. Megan kept her eyes on the road, holding back tears. The only place they could go was her childhood home in Willow Creek, a small, quiet town far from the city. She hadn't been there since her father passed away, but now it was her only choice. After a long, 4-hour drive, they reached the house. It looked old and forgotten, with peeling paint, broken shutters, and weeds everywhere. It was nothing like the fancy house they left behind. Lily looked disgusted. "We're staying here?" she asked. "Just for a little while," Megan replied, though she didn't know how long that would be. Inside, the house was dusty, and the air was stale. The furniture was old and covered in cobwebs. Megan felt overwhelmed, but she knew she had to stay strong for her kids. "We'll clean it up," she said with a forced smile. "It'll feel like home soon." The days that followed were tough. Megan cleaned the house from top to bottom and took on small jobs around town, cleaning houses and working at a grocery store. It wasn't much, but it helped them get by. Her savings from the divorce were running out fast, and she worried about how she would take care of her children. Lily grew angrier as time went on. She missed her old life, the private school, shopping trips, and fancy house. Now, she had to share a small room with her brother in a broken-down house. Megan could feel her daughter's anger but didn't know how to fix it. Jacob, on the other hand, adjusted better. He helped his mom around the house, played outside, and made new friends in the neighborhood. His happiness was the only thing that kept Megan going. But as the months passed, money became a big problem. Megan's small jobs didn't pay enough, and she had already sold anything valuable they had left. She worried about how they would survive, but she knew she had to keep fighting for her children. Greg had left Megan, and there were days she skipped meals just so her kids could eat. Every night, she lay awake, worrying about how long they could survive like this. One evening, after putting her son Jacob to bed, Megan sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills. She buried her face in her hands and cried, feeling trapped and alone. Desperate to find some money, she decided to go through the old things left behind in the house. Maybe she could sell some of her father's belongings. She went up to the attic, not expecting to find anything valuable. It was full of old furniture, dusty boxes, and broken trinkets, but she needed money, so she searched every corner. After hours of digging through junk, she found an old trunk covered by a worn-out blanket. She remembered it. It used to be in her father's bedroom, but he never told her what was inside. He once said, "Some things are better left buried." Back then, she didn't question it. Curious, Megan dragged the trunk to the center of the attic and opened it. Inside were old documents, letters, photos, and bills, just bits of her father's life. But then she found an envelope sealed with wax. It had the initials EC, written in her grandmother's handwriting, Eleanor Carter. Her heart skipped a beat. Her grandmother had died when she was a teenager, and she hadn't thought of her in years. She carefully opened the envelope and read the letter inside. Her eyes widened with shock. It was from a law firm, dated over 40 years ago. It explained how her grandmother, Eleanor, had invested in a small oil company during the Great Depression. That company had later merged with Magnus Petroleum, one of the biggest oil companies in the world. Eleanor's shares were now worth millions. The letter said her father was supposed to claim the inheritance, but as far as Megan knew, he never did. She couldn't believe it. Could this really be true? Could she, a woman struggling to feed her kids, really be sitting on a fortune? Megan immediately called the law firm listed in the letter, only to find out that it no longer existed. But after some research, she learned that the firm had merged with another company, and she still had a chance to claim the inheritance. She quickly set up a meeting with a lawyer named Elizabeth. At the law firm, Elizabeth looked closely at the documents. "If these are real, you could be entitled to a lot of money," she said, "but Magnus Petroleum won't give it up easily." Megan felt both excited and scared. "Do I have a real chance?" she asked. Elizabeth explained that they needed to prove the documents were real, find any missing paperwork, and show that no one else had claimed the shares. If her father never claimed them, then Megan was the rightful heir. Megan's heart raced. This could change everything. But as the legal process began, things got harder. It took months to gather the documents and deal with Magnus Petroleum's lawyers. Megan's financial situation got worse. She could barely pay her bills, and the wait felt endless. Then one evening, the phone rang. Megan hoped it was Elizabeth with good news, but it was Greg, her ex-husband. His voice was calm and smug. "I heard about your little inheritance," he said. Megan's stomach dropped. She hadn't told anyone about it, not even her kids. "How do you know about that?" she asked. Greg laughed. "I have my ways," he said. "You might need some legal help." Megan felt anger rise inside her. Of course, Greg was interested. He always cared about money. "I don't need your help," she snapped. "Stay out of my business." Greg's tone changed. "You don't get it, Megan. Legally, half of anything you inherit belongs to our kids, and that means I have a say in this too." Megan's grip tightened on the phone. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about fighting for her children's future. Megan was shocked when she heard Greg's voice on the phone. Full of arrogance, he said, "I've contacted my lawyer. We're filing a claim for Lily and Jacob. It's only fair, don't you think?" Before Megan could say anything, he hung up. She stood there, stunned, with the phone still in her hand. Greg was trying to take the inheritance. Of course, he was. He had already taken so much from her, why not this too? The next few weeks were full of legal meetings and sleepless nights. Greg did exactly what he said and filed a claim for their children, saying they deserved part of the inheritance. His lawyers were ruthless, using every trick they could to make things hard for Megan. They questioned the documents, argued that Megan's father didn't have the right to the shares, and even accused Megan of trying to cheat the company. The hardest blow came when Lily, her own daughter, took Greg's side. One evening, Lily stood in Megan's doorway with her arms crossed and said, "I don't understand why you're fighting this, Mom. Dad just wants to make sure Jacob and I get what we deserve." Megan's heart sank. "Lily, this inheritance isn't about your father, it's about our future, your future." "Exactly," Lily snapped. "We deserve our share. Dad said you're being selfish, trying to keep it all for yourself." Megan felt her chest tighten. Greg had turned Lily against her. "I'm not keeping it for myself," Megan said, her voice shaking. "I'm trying to secure a future for all of us. Your father just wants control." Lily rolled her eyes. "You're just mad because Dad's better at this than you are. Maybe if you weren't so dependent on him all those years, you'd know how to handle yourself." Anger and pain boiled inside Megan. "I wasn't dependent on him, Lily. I was raising you and Jacob while he was off making his millions. I gave up everything for this family, and now he wants to take away the one thing that could save us." Without another word, Lily turned and slammed the door. Megan collapsed on her bed, crying. She had already lost so much, her marriage, her home, her dignity. Now, it felt like she was losing her children too. The courtroom was cold and tense as the judge took his seat. Megan sat at her table, her heart pounding. Across from her was Greg, looking smug, with Lily by his side. Her lawyer, Elizabeth, leaned over and whispered, "Stay calm, we've got this." Megan nodded, trying to stay strong. Greg's lawyer attacked Megan's character, calling her a bitter ex-wife who just wanted to keep the money out of spite. He argued that the shares belonged to Lily and Jacob, and Greg was only trying to protect his children's interests. Megan sat quietly, her hands shaking as she listened to the lies. She wanted to scream and defend herself, but knew she had to stay calm. When Elizabeth spoke, she was calm and confident. She showed the documents that Megan found, proving that the shares belonged to her through her grandmother, Eleanor Carter. She argued that Greg was only after the inheritance for his own gain. Then, Elizabeth dropped a bombshell. "We have evidence that Greg Carter knew about these shares long before this claim was filed." The courtroom went silent. Elizabeth continued, "He found these documents right after Megan's father passed away. He didn't go after the shares then because he thought it would be legally difficult. but he has known about them for years. The judge looked at Greg and asked, "Is this true?" Greg's smug look disappeared. He stammered, I didn't think it was relevant." Elizabeth didn't back down. "This shows that Greg's actions aren't about his children's best interests. He's trying to take the shares for himself." The judge made his decision quickly. Megan was given full control of the shares. Greg's claim was dismissed as a greedy attempt to use the legal system for his own gain. Megan won, but it was bittersweet. Lily was furious about the decision and didn't speak to her mother for weeks. Greg, embarrassed by the truth coming out, disappeared from their lives. Slowly, Megan started rebuilding her life. She used the money wisely, making sure Jacob and Lily would be taken care of. It took time, but Megan found peace again. The inheritance was a blessing, but the real victory was Megan finding her strength and independence. She fought against betrayal and manipulation, and won. She realized that the greatest inheritance wasn't the money, but the courage and resilience she found within herself.